Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone feeling? Yeah? We're here to talk about the long tail and maybe the top tier too. So both of those will be mentioned today. But I think, a lot of time we're micro-focused on, the top 20 or the top tier of partners that kind of bring in the majority of revenue. But I think there's a lot to be said about the long tail and what they can bring to the table and the value they add to the brand. So we're going to kind of dig in and I'm going to kind of extract some tribal knowledge from these three folks sitting up here. And we're going to kind of get into it and talk a little bit about, where they come from and what experiences they have to share with us and how they're managing long tail. So just like everyone else, I cannot do you guys justice. You will be introducing yourselves. So maybe just we'll start with you, John, and then we'll go kind of in line order. But talk to me not just about, your name, your company, also kind of in your world, what does the top 20 or that top tier and what does that long tail look like for you as well? So John, do you want to kick us off?
Good afternoon, everybody. John Byrne, I'm VP of Retail Marketing and Tempur Sealy. Any Tempur Sealy customers here?
I am.
All right, save your hands. Thank you. I have been leading retail marketing for TSI for 8 years now. Got two teams under me. One team is marketing consultants, press against our largest customers. So think of the Ashleys or the Macy's of this world. So these are more CMO-facing type of consultants. And then we go through market around 20,000 retail stores that we service. So for that, we have that long tail of customers as well. Those are served more through playbooks, through our retail activation team that is here with me today. So yeah, happy to be here.
Thanks, John.
Ann Simon. I am Microsoft Surface. I am the senior partner go-to-market manager for our large authorized device resellers. Prior to Microsoft, I was at Citrix for about 18 years, running partner marketing in the Americas. So a lot of what we did back at Citrix was how do we really leverage those 80% of those partners that are those up and coming partners. So definitely it's it's very dear to my heart. But I think currently at Microsoft, we do have kind of we have a two-tier model approach where we have our large authorized device resellers, and then we have our smaller, what we call disti managed partners. So it's really understanding how do we balance those two.
Thanks, Ann. Paula?
Hi, everyone. Paula Norona. I'm with Dell and have been with the company over the last 14 years, operating in some form or fashion, supporting the channel across distribution, our OEM solutions partners. And in my current role, I'm being asked to look long-term. So the key term here being transformation, right? We always want to optimize how we are running our business, and we're sort of looking ahead in terms of what we want our partners' ecosystem to do. And this topic is very timely because we also have, our top 20% tier partners that drive a significant portion of our revenue. And it's driven by high engagement, both from a sales side and from an enablement side as well. So that results in a tremendous amount of joint account planning. But then what we're very much noticing is that we have these long tail partners that are up and coming. They're specialists. They're touching niche customer bases that we're not tapping into. And this is really where the future is. So we'll talk a little bit more about how we're unlocking some of that value.
Thanks, Paula. So I think, one of the things that we've heard, I think a theme throughout several of these sessions is balance, right? And we're dealing with, the top tier, a lot of times that's the majority of your focus. And so where's the time, where's the efficiencies, and where's the effort to spend on that long tail, which is usually the majority of partners, even though they're not representing the majority of the revenue that's coming into the organization, right? So, how do you differentiate your approach between your top 20% partners and the long tail, and how does that tie to where you double down versus streamline or create some additional efficiencies, maybe through automation and things like that? So, John, I remember when we were prepping for this session, you talked about that two-team structure and how you kind of segregate the top 30 versus your independent. Can you talk a little bit about how, you use maybe a white glove approach with some of that versus maybe more of an automation or turnkey approach for the other?
Yeah, sure. So about 3 years ago at Tempur Sealy, we hired an external consultant to kind of help us segment our customers. One of the key insights that came back is that we were burning a lot of calories in not the biggest opportunity. So we needed to find a way to redeploy our resources more effectively. In the case of Tempur Sealy, the Pareto's 80-20 works precisely. 80% of our revenue is concentrated in 20% of our customer. So we started to then segment our customers based on not only kind of their digital marketing maturity, but also where do we have the willingness and the strong partnership for them to drive change in the category. Because you might have a customer that is very sophisticated, but they are willing to exchange the data or provide you with the visibility and the partnership that you need to win. So we then started to prioritize our customers based on that, and now we have 3 tiers of customers. We have the strategic customers, the Ashleys of this world that you don't win if they don't win. Then you have a mid-tier or probably around 30 customers that are very strategic regional customers for us, and those are the ones that have those dedicated consultative marketing services. And then we have a third tier of kind of the long tail. And each one of those tiers, we also identify that they have different needs. In the case of the top 2 tiers, I think they know how to go to market when it comes to messaging, media, audience targeting. They're very sophisticated. Where they were struggling was more about what's their unique selling proposition within the marketplace, given that one of the biggest insight that we find out is that mattress shopper, about 90% of them cannot actively differentiate one retailer from another. So it's kind of a sea of sameness when it goes to picking a retailer. So for us was how can we help those key retailers identify what makes them different? The customer know why to buy Tempur, but why should we buy it at a national store? So our problem there is very different on how do we win customers than the rest of the tail, which is probably they're getting subsidies from advertising spend from Tempur Sealy, but they're not spending it. In many instances, you find out that they are basically husband and wife type of businesses where the wife is running the floor, husband is running the books. So for us, the challenge there with our retail activation team here is, all right, how do we make it easy? How do we make it almost fully automated? How do we move from the insert logo here approach of a templated co-brand assets to find opportunities for more, midpoint customization for them? So, but it helped us then understand how to deploy resources more effectively and what prompts are we trying to solve.
Absolutely. And you talked about that 2-tier structure that you're kind of supporting on the surface side. Anything else to add that you're kind of, that you see success in when you're dealing with either a white glove approach for the top tier or, more of a programmatic approach for that long tail? And you can sprinkle in some Citrix in there too, if you'd like, from your past.
So definitely, I think similar to what John mentioned is, you have your top set of partners, and it's really that white glove approach. You need to make sure especially in technology, it's a very crowded field.
Very saturated.
Very saturated. So you want to make sure you're staying top of mind for those larger resellers. And then in looking at more of your long tail, like those are important. And I think understanding who they're selling to and the type of customers they're selling to. We also implemented at Citrix almost like a mini white glove approach with them, where we saw potential in certain partners and we said, hey, we're going to basically work with our distributor to really provide some of that white glove treatment to some of those long tail partners that we can get them to that next level. So we kind of took a hybrid approach with that.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I think that dovetails nicely into the next question. And Paula, you're on the hook. So talking about scalable programs versus tailored engagement, you kind of just explained that at a high level. And so in addition to kind of the things that Ann was speaking to, and, we also talk about things like turnkey programs and campaign in a box, what other things kind of deliver impact and scale, and what else matters besides some of the things that we've already talked about? And I feel like we all are getting paid extra for name dropping AI into this conversation. So I know when we were prepping for this, one of the examples that you brought up is, again, AI and helping and assisting and being kind of that power user running alongside of you to help you scale. So, if you're creating a campaign kit or something like that, you're not just throwing it out there and saying, hey, everyone, come find the kit.
That's
how do you guide partner to fish, right?
Yeah. So exactly to your point, Carlin. So the motto of our program is simple, predictable, profitable, right? But how do you really emulate that through the entire life cycle of the deal, to the opportunity, to the campaign, to the pipeline, and then the post-order support, and then where Ansira really comes in our incentive management center, right? Which is a self-serve platform, regardless of the tier of partner that you are with us. But what we're finding to be very meaningful is that while we did have this concept of virtual assistants along that journey, having that integrated into a seamless experience is where really we can build that scalability so that the partner, when they come in, be it the offer that they're looking for, be it that they want to customize that solution so they can self-configure the solution, they can add services to it. And then what happens once that order is placed? So there is an agent that is going out there and telling them, based from a customer care perspective, here's where the order is, or here's where it's stuck, and so on and so forth. And in a similar vein, help them to promote that solution depending to who their end users are based on a particular industry or market, and so on and so forth. So we've been doing it up until this point in fragments because our tools are multiple. And the question is, how do you build a cohesive platform in the back end so the agent is looking up all of these tools and delivering a much more tailored experience to these partners? So we're not there yet, but that is the journey.
I think Kristen on the last panel was mentioning that. There's so much going on behind the scenes to make that end user experience as seamless and as easy as possible. But
That's right.
We are behind, making it all kind of actually stitched together.
Right, that's right.
So John, I remember when we were prepping similar, topic, I'm calling it your co-branded 3.0 story, right? So, you talked about, how you're kind of segmenting, all of your ecosystem today, but you have a very specific model when it comes to turnkey, right? And marketing support. So, you've got your fully custom for top 15, right? So they're the bespoke guys. They're the ones maybe you're kind of creating some very curated content for based on their needs and their asks and their wants. Then you've got that semi-custom mid-tier. And then you've got your insert logo here tier. Do you want to kind of talk us through a little bit of that too?
Yeah. Well, first I want to thank Ansira for putting this session together. It feels very redeeming that we're all trying to solve the same problems here. It's like going...
Even though you're in mattresses and they're in neck, yes.
It's like going...
So thought we could bring it together. We got it.
I was telling my team that it's like going to group counseling where you think you have problems, but then everybody has it. And you go, no, we're not that bad, right?
Right.
So co-branding 3.0, we're fortunate to be category leaders in the spaces that we play. But category leadership comes with responsibility because there's high expectations from the retailers of what do you bring to the table. Mm-hmm. This year, we commissioned, for example, leading into the co-branding 3.0, a need state study. What that study allows is to look beyond just price, feature, and benefit, and really understand what are the primary need states, talking about human intelligence, that our consumers are looking for when it comes to solving for their bedding problems. And we were able to segment the market from a whole different new lens than we have ever done before. So whether you're trying to solve for a sleep problem, whether it's back pain or whether it's sleeping hot, or whether you're a pragmatic buyer that you're buying a bed for a third room for a guest room and you just want a more reliable brand, but you don't want to spend time in the category.
You're not sleeping on the mattress?
Yeah, it's for your mother-in-law or...
She doesn't need a good mattress.
So the intent of that exercise is to provide leadership and guidance, not so much because you're the category leader and this is what I want you to do. It's more about this is where the market is going, and Mr. Retailer, you're still competing based on price and value only. We were able to bring insights to the category that nearly more than half of intended shoppers out there are not looking for price in their top need requirements. So how do you start communicating more effectively using the key primary need state drivers that are driving the category? And we brought that insight to the table. And then as part of those hands-on workshops on co-branding 3.0, we said, all right, in a new world that is need-based driven, how would you need to create a whole new construct of your advertising?
Yeah.
And how do you need to start not talking about yourself and what your price offer? Because to be honest, when you ask retailers in my category what makes you different, they talk about financing, price offer, next day delivery.
Best.
Everybody's trading on those commodities. So how in a need-based world you need to start talking about what's the problem that you're trying to solve for the consumer, then what product do you have in your assortment, which is a curated assortment to solve for that problem, and then what makes you unique as a retailer. So co-branding 3.0 is a whole new way of communicating and driving traffic and conversion through a whole new recipe.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you're focused on the outcome, not the product itself. Especially with a saturated market, it's like what's going to set you apart, right? So you have to talk about, this is what I'm going to do for you. This is how it's going to happen by sleeping on this mattress, right? But you're going to get the best night's sleep ever, right? Like that's the point.
And it seems to be the right formula that is insight driven. They see the light and they go, all right, I want to be in.
They're starting to drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah. It takes effort, it takes time, and a lot of hair lost in the process, but eventually.
Leave it on that. Okay. So we talked about marketing. We talked about segmentation. Let's get into incentives and enablement and maybe even some light measurement conversation of how you're understanding whether or not long tail's performing. So what incentives, enablement models actually move the long tail, and how do you know what's working enough to scale? So I remember, Ian, when we were kind of chatting, we're talking about the standards like co-op, MDF, but we're starting to see the emergence of, new incentives and new ways to kind of, spiff partners, right? So one of the things you talked about was partner profile and signals of potential, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times leads are coming in directly to Microsoft, right? And, you're in the position to move that to a partner, right? And so how do you determine what partners to send those leads to? And then what's that process look like? Are you hounding them? Or is it a one and done? So if you don't start dispositioning this thing, you're never going to get another one? Talk a little bit about that.
So it's a little mix of both. So, and this is where your relationships with your partner sales team, not your external partner sales team, but your actual Microsoft PDM team, whether it was my Citrix PDM team, we all kind of just said, hey, when we look at these long tail partners we did a lot of work with Disty. So Ingram Micro at the time was one of our largest distributors. So they provided us a lot of data on kind of like, these are the complementary products that would be a good fit for you to go target in your recruitment efforts as like, your next set of partners that we can bring to like the next level. And so we had that kind of alignment with our sellers, with our disty, but then once we started recruiting partners, we realized, okay, they're not doing anything. So we recruited a whole bunch of partners that weren't really transacting. So that's where like the incentive and the spiff came in, not to the actual long tail partner, but we actually worked with our champs at Disty, and we said, okay, we kind of mapped out, this is kind of like our yearly recruitment process. By like month 3, we want them to be doing X, Y, and Z. And we need them here's our playbook. We want them to execute, so many different marketing campaigns or sales plays. Each quarter, we want them to do that. And then we started incenting them with sales. And sometimes it was just a referral, like, hey, you know what, there's a customer who's interested in X, Y, Z, and we would send that over. But because we had that basic handshake with our partner sales team, everyone was kind of accountable at that point, where, if there was like a failure at any point in the process, it all went back to, hey, we agreed on agreed on these set of partners, these types of activities, so that we all just became accountable and, the success of the program.
So that alignment and then that re-anchoring if things kind of fall on track. Great. Paula, distribution and distributors are critical to Dell's business as well. And I know when we were chatting, you're talking about, leveraging that to support long tail when maybe you're going out into new markets, right? Or emerging areas, right?
That's it.
And in some cases, maybe you're testing out a POC or something like that. Usually you're going through maybe distribution. So talk a little bit more about that. And then maybe too, like, how do you know if it's working, right? Like, how are you going back and assessing and deciding to ditch something or actually scale it, to the broader kind of partner community?
Yeah, happy to, Carlin. So you're exactly right. So we see our distributors as an extension of Dell, right? Especially in markets and countries where Dell does not even have a direct presence. So we need to rely on our disties to be able to reach the smaller tier partners and also the customers, because only they can communicate and operate in that business language that Dell may not be able to. So that really translates into the program. So what's in it for the distie? So how can we enable our disties to better support these smaller partners, be incentivized for it, and really be given that end-to-end enablement without having Dell kind of hover or be in their business. So have them do it in their way, but certainly bring it back to these partners leading with Dell and thinking about Dell all day long. And then from is it successful or not? So we're looking at a couple of different things. So for example, are these smaller partners logging into our tools? Something we're looking for always is amplifying partner capabilities to our Dell seller community. So by this partner coming in and telling us all about them and the industries they're in, their use cases, their key wins, and so on, we're able to take all of that information back and now even feed it to our sellers through an agentic chat functionality, right? So it's really looking at that closed loop of, are the disties going after these smaller partners in countries that we need them to be front and center? And then how are these smaller tier partners engaging with our tools and within our platform so we can then amplify their capabilities within Dell?
So distribution's kind of helping you scale, basically.
That's right.
So, if you didn't have those opportunities or those outlets, you guys would be carrying the larger lift as opposed to leveraging the distie for that motion.
And the resources and all of the planning that comes with it. Yeah.
All right. So cross-industry future, guys. We're going ahead 2-3 years, right? The year 2028. So looking ahead 2 to 5 years, how do you see the way you manage the long tail changing, and what can your industry learn from the others on the stage? So throwing it out there, see if you guys can kind of help us stitch this together. But John, pretend like you're the great Zambini and tell me a little bit more about how you're increasingly relying on like automation, for example, and turnkey support. And then also, how are you thinking about things? Because when you're looking at the long tail, they are the 80%, but they still have their value proposition. And, you talked about the mom and pop shop. There's still some value there. So like, how do you make sure that you're scaling, but also pulling in their kind of piece that makes them unique,
Well, the sales VPs are always going to try to remind me that the little guy counts. They love all their customers with the same love. So they're important nonetheless. I think the 3-year down the line is, how do we leverage AI to interconnect data that right now resides within silos, within Tempur. For example, we do track with our team downloadable assets similarly in terms of see for any particular promotional pulse period, which retailers downloaded what. But how great would it be that we have AI agentic that can really scrape the data from all my independent small retailers and see what assets did they place within their sites. It's able to scan their advertising and see what they ran and how my brand was positioned from a share of voice perspective within their advertising. And all those tools are available today. It's just, we just need to aggregate the information and put it in the hands of the people that can make change in real time, rather than us looking 3 months afterwards, President's Day, and see how our sales perform. So to what extent can we find the power of AI to provide a more real-time diagnostics that we can act on, but also more predictability as well. So those customers that did A, B, and C were able to unlock this amount of growth and then use it as a way to sell it within the next cycle.
So a knowledge base where everything kind of comes together and being able to tap that and continue to kind of add to it is going to help you guys evolve. And from your perspective, the future of ecosystem consolidation, And I also think there's something to be said about, your partners as well. And while again, they're the long tail in some consideration, we are looking at the two-tier structure, you've got a lot of specialized, long tail partners, right? Like you've got your SIs, your ISVs, you've got your MSPs, and they do bring very niche kind of, value to the table, right? And a lot of times, Paul, I think you hit on this earlier, they're more nimble, right? There's not as much red tape working with them. You can bring a few of them together and there's no conflict of interest, and when you're kind of moving that opportunity along. So talk a little bit about where you think the ecosystem's heading from a consolidation standpoint, where those guys are going to kind of play.
And I think, we're kind of seeing it also, even if you looked at what Omar Johnson spoke about, it's just about the whole tribal knowledge and more of that emotion. I feel like those long tail partners, they're really may have more of that footprint in their local communities. People are really, I would say, consumers who purchase for their companies are also going back to that shop local approach where, hey, we want to make sure we are working with a company, a smaller, reseller that has that local footprint. So pulling that into the agentic AI story, that's where I think it could have really a lot of impact with some of the discussions that we heard earlier around AEO. How do we really enable those smaller niche partners to really be more nimble? Because, they don't have a lot of time. And I don't remember who mentioned it, but maybe it was in the last session. A lot of these partners probably don't have sophisticated marketing teams. So how do we really make it so that they just have to push a button and it's done? So I think we're going to see a lot more of that automation, but also leveraging AI to really make sure whether they're in a specific small industry where they could really customize something to tailor to that very specific local audience. So I think that's where, kind of bridging together AI plus automation and just making it very simple for these smaller resellers to go out and execute and, be a part of your brand.
Paula, future. So, we know the majority of everything is sold through partner for Dell, but you do have, some collabs going on between direct and maybe a partner hybrid GTM, right?
Yep.
So talk a little bit about that and how, that partner is kind of influencing and supporting that direct motion or vice versa. What are they learning from each other?
Yeah. So you're so right, Carlin. So Dell has this unique seller engine model where we sell both in the direct space and then complemented with a equally robust partner go-to-market motion. And what we're finding is that we're trying to double down into where or which markets and countries that direct actually is the fastest way to get to the customer. At the same time, though, it's these smaller long-tail partners that we call are able to do the last mile run, right? From a speed of execution standpoint, your point, there could be something that Dell can do really well, but we're not able to turn it around in the time frame that the customer is looking for. And these partners have the capabilities, but don't have the infrastructure necessarily, and that's where Dell can come in and complement that. And that's how I see that transforming as we go into the next couple of years is, as Anne pointed out, it is the ease and simplicity of doing business. But from an operational standpoint, to go really map that out end to end, I'd say is not sexy, right? And that's really the body of work in terms of agentic assistance coming in to help us with, because that'll help that last mile partner to choose Dell over the others.
100%. All right, guys, look at that. We are right on time. So thanks to everyone. Thank you, panelists. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the tribal knowledge. These guys are going to be all around in the next day and a half. So please, find them, ask them questions, steal more of their tribal knowledge. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.